Hello everyone and welcome back to Planet Coaster. We will be working on a new Plaza edition, adding on to the Air Temple Island here from Legend of Korra. And it's an interesting episode because we've established a lot of the proportions already on the right side, and now we're trying to make the left side align up as best to our ability. And this is where you kind of start running into problems, because when you say draw something, sculpt something, or build something, and you kind of build it in chunks and you slowly add it on at a time instead of working at all of it at once, you're going to run into some problems. Mainly being that some of the scale and proportion of these aren't going to fully line up. And that's okay. It's close enough to where it's not really going to bother me a whole lot. But I do spend a lot of time kind of faffing about, trying my best with sculpting some of this land out, getting a lot of this terrain kind of established so we can at least start building on it. Because a good strong foundation is going to hopefully make everything easier from that point on. So we're making a large raised plateau, of course. Since it is an island, it's technically supposed to be this raised mountainside. And now we're just laying out large swaths of this roof tile that we are using as the plaza floor. And this is, of course, a different roof tile from everywhere else. It seems like the different sections of plaza and pathing in the whole facility kind of have their own unique color scheme in terms of plaza and decoration around the actual pathing. So that's pretty cool. I like having these raised sections, these lower sections that just feel a little unique from each other, but also cohesive. Also, there's going to end up being a water element on this side once we get there. But first things first, it is all about just laying out this left. It's almost like a slight shoehorn shape going out to the left side along the cliff's edge. And then we, of course, need to have some sort of whitish kind of plaster highlight following that all the way around. This is kind of like the edge of the plaza marker. Very common. We also did something like this on the right plaza. And it's pretty cool to do. I do like having these framing elements along here, and design-wise, it's definitely a solid concept to do, and it could work well in many parks, if not just in a build like this. You know, you want to have framing elements, you want to have height variations, and everything just kind of works together naturally like that. At this point, realize that I can't really continue the left side until I at least rough in some of the main staircase a little bit more. So there's a small mid-tier plaza there, and then a larger mid-tier plaza about yay. Now the thing is, this mid-tier plaza, the larger one down there, needs to have a bridge going to the left at a hard 90-degree angle, going across a valley in the mountainside here, and then that needs to raise up and somehow attach to this upper plaza in the corner of it. So we had to move the plaza over, obviously, and we need to work on sculpting out this terrain. Now, Planet Coaster, it's actually pretty hard to get a smooth, consistent gradient. It's something that I struggle with, and really the best thing to do is to try and use the flatten to surface tool. And you kind of establish a ridge, and depending on that rounded ridge where you start this flatten to surface, it's going to give you your slope. So you can see I'm starting up top and then slowly just carving this down at a gentle slope or a more steep slope depending on the area of this ramp. And it takes many iterations because the drawings that I'm going off of, there's not many real aerial views of the left side of the island. There's one or two, but they're kind of not very great. There's some good fan art paintings of this whole area, and that's kind of my main reference for a lot of these buildings. So that's what I'm using here. Sadly, sometimes with drawings and paintings, you're going to lose a bit of perspective over time. And this is one of the areas where the perspective doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, it could just be the angle that they decided to draw this at, and for some reason that angle just kind of creates a little bit of a hard read area. But in general, this path connecting straight up to that corner like that, in my reference images, looks a little bit more like a straight shot, and it looks far more steep than reference. So it's okay. We're just gonna have to keep working at it and adjust things as we go. Again, with these type of builds, you're not really shooting for 100% accuracy. You're just shooting for accuracy enough, just because of the limitations of things. If we were making like a model, like an actual like diorama of some kind, we would probably want to be a little bit more accurate. But this is Planet Coaster. I'm basically building a diorama in a coaster simulation game, so cut me some slack. Anyways, other than that, just gonna establish a little bit more ridges. And the way I like to establish these harder ridgeline and canyon-like elements is simply, again, using the flatten to surface tool to get a lot of those sharper edges and slopes at steep angles. From there, we need to start decorating a little bit of the left side of the main temple pagoda. And it needs to match the right side a little bit in terms of all of these kind of rocks and spire elements, just aligning the main pathway. We'll also have to put some bushes and shrubbery, some additional kind of just grounding rocks to make it look a little bit more 3D. The actual paint tool, you can only use it so much. If I were to color this whole area with a paint tool and say, oh, that's going to represent the rocks for us, it's actually going to be a little detriment. You do need to add just a touch of physicality to it, I find, and at that point everything kind of pops out and creates a really nice feel overall to kind of establish your height levels in those areas. So that's my little trick that I like to use in these slightly raised kind of hill sections. You use some of the paint tool to establish kind of your background layer, and then use these 3D actual objects to establish kind of transitional phases like we're doing here along this path. We are simply kind of making some larger chunks of rocks and then spacing that out with some smaller bits just to break up the surface of the area. We'll go back in with the paint tool here in a second just to touch all of that up. Shrubs, of course, always your best friend in Planet Coaster. If you have an ugly spot, cover it up with shrubs. No. And shrubs always just look really nice and adds a nice, I guess you could say, variety of color and texture to the area that you wouldn't normally get otherwise. This lower section, of course, still has rocks, not quite as tall or spire-like, but they do still have the rugged kind of outpost that we're used to kind of seeing elsewhere. And we can even save blueprints of these things, kind of paste them around a little bit at different orientations to give some variation in it that hopefully can trick the eye enough that people don't recognize that this is the exact same formation everywhere. And overall, it's pretty cool looking. I like the way this whole thing is laid out in the sense that we have these pathways, these open flat surfaces. You get some rugged terrain right next to it, and then that's backdropped by a wall of green, and it's a very interesting and dynamic kind of transition of things. You're not immediately hit with that tree line. You have some nice rough terrain, similar to something that you might see, say, along a cliff edge or an ocean edge, where you get this kind of dead area where it might be too windy or just might not support, foliage as well as the other areas, and so you get these rock outcrops. And it just looks cool. And it also completes the front feeling of that temple and really grinds that down and make that look really cool looking. So, moving on, we are going to be making, I don't know what's in the bottom left corner, to be honest. This is either one of the main residential areas, or it is the male dorm for the temple. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't seen like a labeled map anywhere that explains exactly what the left side is, but it has about a quarter tile wide kind of wall going around it, you know, and that's going to have its own roof and everything, and it's going to look pretty interesting. A nice, pretty standard L-shaped building with some variation onto the right side there, and we can just easily put the roof on top of this using our roof tiles quick enough, and we will be basically roofing for the rest of this episode. Now, we will have to make some additional custom tiles and things, but that'll hopefully come a little bit later here in this speed build. It was a lot of effort in terms of sculpting the terrain out. In fact, I cut out a lot of that footage because I can really only talk about mountains for so long. And it was just an interesting process trying to get the base shape of the mountain. Again, this is all kind of a rough rendition, and once all the buildings are constructed and placed, we'll be able to actually move on to the final bit there. Now, for the top of this roof, this is actually a three grid sized building here, and my tile set is used in more of a even number grid size. So what I'm going to have to do here is build a custom roof tile, just so these angles can meet up at a nice peak, and it's relatively quick as long as you know what to copy and paste and move to make a quick tile piece. And as you can see here, we're just doing about the equivalent of the lower section and just moving those up until they meet, and then simply attach a front end to this. Now there's actually, because this is such a custom angle, there's no wall piece that's going to sit perfectly flush to this, so I have to use a combination of different peak heights to fill in all those little gaps and make sure it's at least mostly sealed. Here, I actually didn't realize I left the park open, so we had about 3,500 guests just sitting there bogging down my sim speed, so I kicked everyone out. That was just interesting to see sped up. It took a little while for all those AI to figure out to turn around and to leave. But other than that, we're not going to do any wall texturing on the main building this episode. We're going to get to that next episode, and also an additional building that'll hopefully finish out this lower plaza area. But, you know, we're going to be using these kind of golden pillars on the corners and adding little overhangs and additional roofing elements over time. You know, of course, we'll have to make a custom kind of corner piece here using these ridge elements, and just slowly rotate it down until it gets the angle that you want, and then you can copy and paste that over to the opposite side by about 90 degrees, and there you go, you get a nice corner piece that's flush to the rest of the building. Realize that the right kind of roof line there needed an additional piece there. Now this wall needed a custom roof tile as well, because obviously it is a lot smaller than a lot of our roofs that we've done so far, and you know, just quickly copying that over. It's also going to be a more gentle slope than previously done, and it is going to have a nice low profile and a thin profile. So overall, it does look pretty interesting, and we will just get that flush to that wall and wrap this all the way around. We'll also have to make some custom corner pieces like we tend to always have to do. I really need to take the time and kind of pre-plan these corner pieces, but hey, what are you gonna do? It feels like I have to constantly remind myself about that. There's also a little bit of a stone foundation along this wall. This wall is actually really plain, and so that little bit of foundation kind of makes the lower area a bit wider and grounded, and balances out the wider roof and makes that look pretty cool. So we'll just copy and paste this around. This whole plaza is going to look pretty cool once it's all done. We'll have a nice circle kind of entryway, and that'll be inset, and we'll have to make a custom roof tile for that here shortly. In fact, the screenshot that is the thumbnail is the view out of that archway into the actual main plaza, and it does look very beautiful. I'm really happy with that little detail and how that's going to turn out. It took a little while to get that roof to look correct, but sometimes you just have to do it the right way, which is sometimes the long way. You can see I'm trying to copy and paste these around, trying to get this to go up and over. Unlike the other section where we just rotated at 45 degrees, I wanted something a little bit more visually rounded and more accurate to what you might see in real life. Another problem is that I accidentally grabbed two versions of the wood that was not going to work out with each other. So what I wanted to do is basically start over, and then we're just going to do 1/2 of the ring. You can see just testing that out as, holy crap, there's a lot of sirens out there. Wow, sorry about that. We got 1/2 of the ring. Anyways, as I lose my train of thoughts, someone is robbing a bank. We got 1/2 of it. We'll copy that around and then add some gold trim along the top. So that's pretty much all I got done this episode. If you guys want to go ahead and give me your feedback as we go through the real time, and you guys can hopefully enjoy that. So here we go. Okay, so this is the current view from over the martial arts kind of training area, looking at the main temple. And you can see now that the left side is kind of detailed out, everything is just slowly starting to pop out. We're getting layers, we're getting points of interest kind of embedded in the distance, up close, colors using the red trees and the yellow trees, and more as shrubs than actual trees themselves. And it's really just becoming a nice grounded area in general. We'll get some more trees, and of course ignore the floating rocks in the background. Those are placeholders, as that's what I used to copy and paste around to make all these wonderful jagged little rocks and points of interest. So this is, of course, really the most completed area of this episode. Everything else is just laying down groundwork, and laying down groundwork is a time-consuming and important task. So we got a lot of the plaza laid out. I'm gonna have to go in and have to reskin a lot of this area, start putting in some trees, some bushes, so that we can get this all kind of dictated out. We have a lot of the mountainside kind of carved out. We have the potential spot for the first large kind of really single arch bridge that goes across this deep cut into the island itself. We have a little upper plaza, the main kind of lower one. Part of the path somewhat carved into the mountainside that's going to lead us all the way down to a secondary bridge eventually. This one's going to be a multiple arched bridge, kind of just simply going across. It's also about half as tall as the one behind it, and so you're going to get a lot of height layers as you go up the actual terrain side, and that's going to look really cool eventually over time, especially with all this other stuff kind of peeking up over the ridge. We get a little bit of where the beach head kind of starts down here. We have a lot of the terrain kind of sculpted out, just the bulk of the terrain. You want to over bulk your mountains, and then you want to cut away. At least that's the way I find most comfortable and most, I guess, efficient way to work for me. Again, some people might be able to build up the mountain completely and do it that way. I find I make mistakes, and I'm gonna have to make multiple passes, so I rather have more material than needed and then just cut away until I have what I want. And if I mess up, I can just plop on some more and then cut it away again. It's a lot more forgiving and over time. Also, going to slowly start marking out some of the water elements as well. This is all going to be water down here. We have the beach. We're going to have a little bit of the beach kind of coming back into this ravine area. where it almost looks more like a river, even though it doesn't directly make one. It's more, I guess you could say, a back lagoon. We get some additional beach forming on this side. We'll have to make some mountains over here to connect to this ridge and actually start sculpting out here so we don't have this wall anymore. But once this has water and some additional pathing elements and buildings down here, I'm just excited to see this thing fully come together, because the longer I work on this, and the more that's complete, even from a distance, and sure, the roof isn't fully loading in, but I'm just super proud of what we've gotten so far. But let's go over here. This is the new kind of building area, and this is the nice kind of circular archway that goes into the plaza. And the plaza, of course, follows a lot of the same roof motifs that the main roof has. You know, we have a nice golden ridge going along that, and the spikes change along the circular doorway. We get some ridges and some height variation here. Of course, we're going to have redundant roof elements. That's just how I've been working. It's a lot quicker. I don't have to worry about things like that. Our FPS is actually still really good. Frontier is doing a great job in terms of optimizing, kind of only loading in what you're looking at. So I'm getting about 40 FPS just in this area. Of course, if I scroll back, I'll get less. But overall, like it's running really well for something that's close to 80,000 parts at this point. We have a little back entryway, some sort of back shed here. We'll get some more trees and rocks interacting with this back section, make it look really natural and things like that. And next episode, we'll detail this building out. We'll start on two more buildings here. That's kind of capping off the northern plaza that these walls are surrounding. Well, I think there's also a gazebo of some kind in this section. There's a lot of little details here, and you know, you really want to get these right so that it looks cluttered but also believable. And we'll just slowly start working our way up along this direction, get this water element done, and there's still a lot to do. So if you guys enjoyed today's episode of Planet Coaster, feel free to subscribe to my channel for more creative goodness such as this. I'm going to leave you with a nice little shot of what the thumbnail was this episode, essentially just looking out through this archway at the completed section, and you guys can get a good feeling for how everything's going to look at the ground level. If you want to go ahead and check out the rest of the series, there is a playlist on this channel, and you can see how all of this is made. Go ahead and leave a comment down below on what you guys think, and I will see you guys in the next episode.